All right, welcome back. Today we have Cody Delmendo here from CHGO. Cody, thanks for being here.
Yeah, Steve, I appreciate it, man. I love the background that you got going on there.
Yeah,
And
that one.
yeah, I mean, there's just so much to like about this, whether it's you got the Illinois flag, you got the Eastern Illinois one, and then you got the Cubs one even right there too. So
I know you
yeah.
should say the Alabama one, but that's okay.
I mean, I don't hate Alabama like a lot of Alabama haters. I do root for their demise just because they're just so good, but it's a respect thing, and I don't like hate them like I hate like Iowa, for example.
Oh yes, yes, equal hatred, especially basketball.
Yeah, yeah. So,
So I like coaches, and so I have followed Nick Saban since before Alabama.
oh,
So
okay.
you can call me a bandwagon if you want. I just have to piss people off if you want me to be honest with you. But So I'm just a Nick Saban person, so it was just easy, I guess. But I was a fan
Mhm.
of his way before that. Like this podcast, I've had so many college coaches on. I'm just a fan of
Yeah.
coaches. But that's just up to piss people off. So
All right. Well, I actually Nick Saban. I want to say it was his daughter. Nick Saban's daughter was in Chicago this weekend. She was at one of my favorite bars. They posted a picture of her and her friends on their Instagram account.
oh,
And I think it's his daughter. I don't know his family, but like her last name was Saban, and she looked fairly young, like in her 20s. So I assume maybe it was a daughter or a niece, maybe. I don't know, but yeah, it was kind of they made it this whole big thing. So I was like, oh,
probably
okay,
true. Probably true then.
yeah.
Big deal about it.
Hmm.
I'm twittering it right now.
It was the
Yeah.
bar is almost home. It's in Wrigley, right across diagonally across from the obvious shirt store, like north of Wrigley Field. The bar has only been there for about a year. They just opened last year, so they're not like a staple in that neighborhood or anything. But
Oh yeah,
um,
that was her
yeah,
daughter, his daughter. She was there.
okay, all right.
Dang it. Didn't get I live too far away. I live in Naperville. It's not happening to go over there. Because between you and me, I hate going to the city. There's nothing worse than getting into the city.
I feel like that's what every suburb person says. I'm not from the suburbs. I'm not even from Chicago, but uh I feel like everyone that I know from that lives in the suburbs, the last thing they want to do is come here.
Now, where are you from originally then?
Uh, so I'm from Central Illinois. I always tell people I'm from like a small town in the middle of nowhere, and which is true. But the town's called Mowequa.
Uh-huh.
It's about 20 minutes south of Decatur,
Yep.
an hour southwest of Champaign,
Yep.
about 45 minutes east of Springfield, and I'd say like an hour straight south from Bloomington Normal. Right, you take I-51 all the way down. If you're on I-51 coming from your neck of the woods, you hit I-51 once you get to like Bloomington Normal, uh, and you just go straight south. You go right through it. It takes 3 minutes, but you'll go right through it.
Yeah, I grew up right outside of Champaign. So I grew up in Central Illinois as well. Central Illinois boy.
Nice.
Uh,
Yeah. And that's why like a lot of people don't understand my Illini fandom, but I feel like, and maybe you can attest to this a little bit, but I feel like if you grew up within like an hour radius of Champaign, you were just kind of born and bred
yep.
into a Illini fandom, whether you went to school there or not. It was just kind of part of the culture.
Yep.
And that's why I'm an Illini fan now. I I wish I had I would have had the grades and the money to go to
Oh,
Illinois, but I
yes.
didn't. So I went to Eastern Illinois instead, and
Uh-huh.
I had a great college experience there. And I think even students there always just kind of um called it like U of I South or something
Mm,
like that in
Yep.
some ways, right? Like
Yep.
it's just what it is. And we acknowledge that they're a much bigger school, much bigger, passionate fan base for their sports and everything. And the thing is that most people who went to EIU are people from St. Louis or Chicago. And
Hmm.
you got the small little percentage of people from out of state or, foreign exchange students, stuff like that. But a large majority of the student body was just St. Louis or Chicago. And so you just had a lot of like Illini fans in general that went to school there too. So,
Right.
um, yeah, it's always my Illini fandom that always come from just where I live growing up. I don't know if that would have been it would have been like that if, if I didn't like live or if I didn't grow up close to Champaign. I feel like if I had grown up like here in the suburbs or in the city here, I feel like it could have been different. But, um, I remember becoming a huge Illini fan just as a kid watching that team that went to the Final Four
Hmm. Yeah.
during the 04-05 season. And it was a whole thing around my school. Like everyone was talking about it. Everyone had their Illini gear. It was a special time. So it just always has carried I've always carried that fandom around because of just the culture of growing up there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, growing up there, you were born an Illini fan.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I had friends that were Ohio State fans. No clue how that happens.
Right.
You were a Cubs fan or a Cardinal fan. There was really no White Sox in Central
Right.
Illinois. It's always Cubs, Cardinals.
Yeah. I will say, and this is a credit to Sox fans, uh, ever since I've gotten older, I feel like I've seen a lot more White Sox fans when I go back home or if
Hmm.
I'm
Yep.
around the general Central Illinois area. I don't know if it's just White Sox fans that lived here in Chicago and then moved south or what, but
Maybe.
whenever I was a kid, I agree. Like there weren't a lot of White Sox fans where I grew up. It really was Cubs or Cardinals. And to me, like it's when I say that, I think like White Sox fans would get offended by it, but it's just a fact. It's not even like it's not me trying to put down their fan base because they're one of the more cheaper tickets in town and like
Yep.
the jokes about how no one goes to their games and stuff. Like it's just I don't know what it is, man. Like I just I just know growing up that half my friends were Cubs fans and half my friends were Cardinal fans, and so
And
that's why the rivalry.
in school,
Yeah.
you're arguing back and forth. There was no White
Oh
Sox
yeah.
ever. It
I
was
was so young. I was so young that when I was going through like grade school and stuff, I grew up through like the '98 home run race.
yep,
So
yep,
I half like not when I say half, I mean like 85% of my friend group was Cardinal fans.
yep.
And so I've had to hear it from this fan base my entire life. That's why I have such a disdain for them, and their fan base at least, and their team. But the 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 fact that we got to grow up through the summer of '98 and going through that era of time of baseball, growing up through it as a kid, I always try to emphasize it, especially when we talk about Sammy Sosa on CHGO Cubs, about how much that home run race and just that era of time like really made a bunch of fans or made a bunch of kids baseball fans.
Yep.
And I think a lot of the older generations don't necessarily understand. I could be wrong on that, but I that's the feeling I get. But I think at the end of the day, fans of whatever team or whatever, they become fans because of guys who transcended the game. And those two guys, Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire, like to me, they saved the game, man. And
Yeah.
so, go again, growing up with the fan base of the opposite team through that home run race and the rivalry mixed in, it was a different level of banter that I've like. It was the first time I've experienced banter in my childhood, and I would say that as I got older and everything, I still don't think I've ever experienced the type of banter I experienced during that. Of course, I was a kid and we all said dumb shit at the time. And,
Right.
you say when you're a kid, you just kind of, you don't even know what you're saying. You just say shit you hear or see on
Right.
TV or whatever, right? But,
Right.
um, yeah, like that rivalry is something down there in Central Illinois. And, I kind of wish it was we had a little bit more of it up here, in terms of, I I guess for Cubs Cardinals, but there are Cardinal fans here, but it's just not nearly as many, obviously. And it's you're either a Cubs or a Sox fan, from the most part here, and that makes sense. There's two teams here, right? So,
Right.
um, but I do kind of miss just the bickering with people, all the time, a little
Oh,
bit,
it would
just
get
a little bit.
it would get heated. You may not talk to your friend for like 2 days. It would get
I know.
especially when
There's something about it that just, I don't know. But I will say, like, you didn't really ask me this, but like sometimes people ask me like why I hate the Cardinals so much, and it really is just like I'm fueled. I'm legitimately fueled by all the banter and the shit talk with me
yes,
and my friends and everything like that when I was a kid and
yes.
where I grew up. It's all literally fueled from that. There's nothing else, and I will carry that fuel forever. It doesn't ever go empty. It's
Oh,
always going to be there, man.
well, that's why uh, I don't think I'd hate the Cardinals as much if it wasn't for the fans. Like you're obviously going to hate them. I said the same thing
Mm-hmm.
about LeBron James. I might have been a fan of LeBron James because I was such a Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant guy.
Sure.
The fans. It was friends I had. It was the fan
Mm-hmm.
base. Seeing it when social media blew up, I was like, I can't do this. I cannot
Yeah.
handle the fans, so I cannot like this guy
Yeah.
at
I
all.
can. I feel the same about LeBron too. I will say, related to LeBron, in the back half of his career, I have found a way to at least respect the player he is, because I don't know if we'll ever see another player like him. And I hate saying it, and I hate like giving him that respect, but he's played for so long and been so consistent that I feel like I have no choice to. However, when I was in college and when he like left Cleveland, went to Miami, and they formed like that super team and all of that, it just rubbed me the wrong way. I don't think I've ever had more disdain for an athlete than I did LeBron during the Derrick Rose years.
I was the same way. I was at Eastern too.
Yeah,
See, we probably crossed paths. That's the crazy part. I was
really.
I was down there in 2009, and then I just lived there for a while. I didn't leave till 2018, so I was
Oh
down there all
wow.
the time.
Okay, yeah, we probably did cross paths at one point. I was there from 2012 to 2015. So, yeah, I was like, for my sports fandom when I was in college, there was nothing good about it except for the Bulls being, they're a competitive team. They had some good playoff teams, and then just, unfortunately, like the Rose era, uh,
Ugh.
it was just full of so many injuries. But when I was down there, it was like I had to deal with the Cardinal fans because their team that went to the World Series in 2013, and the
Mhm.
fact that they had just won a World Series in 2011, like they were just so
Oh
insufferable.
yeah.
And meanwhile, the Cubs were in the beginning of like their rebuild or whatever, and with the curse, it's just like it was just so insufferable to have to deal with them. On top of a lot of them were like LeBron fans because St. Louis didn't have like an NBA team either.
Oh yeah.
So
The
a
worst.
lot, it was almost like a lot of like my Cardinal fan friends, they just liked LeBron because they knew how much I hated LeBron. So they would just pile it on. And
Right.
it just they made themselves significantly more insufferable. I dream of having times like that, to just be that insufferable. And the most insufferable I've ever been as a fan was probably just from the moment the Cubs won the World Series in 2016 all the way up until they were eliminated in the NLCS in 2017. I used
Mhm.
that entire year to be the most insufferable fan I could possibly be, because it was the first time in my life I actually could. Because
Right.
I'd
Right.
never experienced a team of mine have success. The best before the Cubs won the World Series, the best thing I had was Illinois going the Final Four,
Yep.
the Bears going the Super Bowl in '06,
Yep.
and a couple the Rose MVP season. And admittedly, I'm not a huge like Blackhawks hockey fan in general. I don't like I support them now just because of working at CHGO, but growing up and all of that, I was never a hockey fan.
Right.
So like when the Hawks won the 3 cups, of course it was a team in Chicago that I just had never really followed or cared about. And I
Right.
didn't want a bandwagon. So it was just like one of those things where it's like, oh, they did well, great, awesome. I'm happy for them. Like
Right.
I don't know. I was just happy for Chicago. It wasn't like I felt any kind of emotion towards it, right? So
Right.
um so you take that out and it's like the only thing I really had was those few things. So when the Cubs won the World Series in 16, I was my peak of just being the most insufferable fan possible was for the next year. And man, was it a fun,
Yes.
wonderful
Yes.
time.
Oh, it was great. I lived in Charleston, all those Cardinal fans, and I was friends
Mm-hmm.
with them. One of my
Oh,
buddies in
yeah.
Charleston, his dad was the judge in town. He's a big Cardinal guy. So anytime we go over there every Sunday for NFL, I let them remember. I would always come in and be like, "How's those Cardinals?" And they always be like, "Well, look at all of our championships." I'm like, "Da da 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 da." You always say this, so look at this. I would never shut up. And the judge was like,
Yeah.
"Steve, the
That's
judge,
the thing. That's about fandom, man. That's what's the best part about being a fan of whatever. It's just like when you get your time to just be insufferable, it's the best. It's
it's awesome."
like oh my, I would be the worst person if I was a Packers fan or like a
I know.
Patriots fan,
I would be.
I would be the worst person. People would probably legitimately hate me just for sports reasons.
Well, and before the Cubs won the World Series, my second favorite team became like the Red Sox, only because they kept beating the Cardinals
Yeah.
in the World Series. So I remember, was it 2011 or whenever the White Red Sox beat
2013.
13?
Yeah.
My buddy who I lived with was a Cardinal fan. So when that World Series on, I put on the Red Sox hat and just sit there, and he'd be like, "Get out, get out." And then when they lost, I'm jumping up and down, and he was like, "Hey, go fuck off," and everything else. It's just
Yeah.
whatever I can do to piss a Cardinal fan off, I was doing it, you
Oh
know?
my, yes. Yeah. No, I'll say as I've gotten older, I've laid off a little bit, at least with my own friends. But man, do I take some of that fuel and put it towards the random Cardinal fans that are in my Twitter comments or whatever. Oh my God, Cardinals Twitter thinks that the Cardinals like live rent free in my head. And the thing is like, they're right. They do. I live to piss off their fan base on
Yep.
social media. That is part of what people would call my brand, right? Like it
Right.
just is. And I embrace it and I don't shy away from it. Like it's just part of the kind of fan that I am, the kind of Cubs fan that I am. I feel like the way that I do it, I think it resonates with a lot of Cubs fans because no Cubs fan likes the Cardinals, right? So um do I get a little do I go over the line a little bit sometimes? Perhaps. But at the same time, um I think I've dialed it back enough to where it's all in good fun, but man, it's really gratifying whenever some Cardinal fan out there um maybe have seen my account for the first time and they're like, who the fuck is this idiot?
Right. Right.
And then they get triggered by whatever I say. And it honestly just it makes me laugh a lot. I won't lie.
Oh yeah. That and Bears Twitter, you know, Bears, I can't stand it. Either one. Cardinals Twitter,
Yeah.
Bears Twitter, I can't do it.
Yeah. Bears Twitter, man. I don't know how my guy Greg Braggs does it, man.
Well, I'm a part of it. That's the problem, is like I
Okay.
see, well, because probably like when people find yours for the first time, I'm seeing some of this for the first time, and I just
Mhm.
comment on shit because I want to stir it up. Some
Oh,
of it
okay.
I believe, but some of it I'm like, let me stir this a little bit.
You
Another,
ready to stir the
yeah,
pot? Okay.
what Greg posts, I don't stir it because he's pretty much he's like one of the only people that's like even keel on stuff that I see, and I'm like, okay, some of
Yeah.
it's his fandom, and you just go with it, but the rest of the people, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't even get me started on that. It's like you were all about Justin Fields, and then they're like, well, he sucks, and I'm like, well, I've been saying that for years, and now I just stir the pot.
I related to the Bears like quarterback stuff. I always like once the season ended and this conversation really dialed up a notch. I always said that that I was openly a guy who wanted to see Fields have success here, but I understood why trading him and going with Williams or whoever they're going to draft
Right.
was the smart business move and perhaps even roster wise too. Um, I I think what always bothered me though is the people who legitimately thought that Fields just was really bad, and um, I think that I'm not making excuses, but I am saying that the situation he was put in with the Bears was not fair. And I think that's fair to say. And I think there's a lot of Bears fans out there who don't believe that. And I just don't get that. That's the only thing that I don't get about the debate or whatever. And to me, it's a little like makes me raise my eyebrow just a little bit because there were more people who were willing to ride it out with Mitch Trubisky much longer. And he clearly wasn't that good at all, ever. I mean, people use his cute like quarterback win-loss record and the fact that he helped the Bears win the division, but that roster was so much better when he first like became the starter, and we all know the defense was a massive reason that they won games in 2018.
Right.
So like it's like I think on Bears Twitter it's all about how people want to push their agenda. And that's why why you said what you said about Braggs is like kind of I wish more fans were a little bit about or a little bit more like, because at least on Bears Twitter, because it can be so toxic. But I think there's so many fans that are just so far on one side of the spectrum.
Yep.
And again, like I know that Fields wasn't some elite quarterback or anything like that, but I think if you can't sit here and tell me that that guy doesn't have talent or some sort of potential, and if with the right guys around him, maybe he could be a solid NFL quarterback, then I just don't know what you're watching, man. And I'm not saying that he could be like a Super Bowl winning quarterback or anything. I'm just saying that I think he could be a serviceable quarterback in the NFL. You can't tell me that this guy can't, like, for instance, like the Vikings, why they signed Sam Darnold instead of trade. Like, I don't want the Bears to trade Justin Fields to the Vikings, but like, I'm sorry, Justin Fields is better than Sam fucking Darnold, bro.
Right.
So it is what it is about the debate and the discourse that came with it. We'll be talking about it for years to come if Fields goes on to do well with Pittsburgh and whoever the Bears take isn't good. But, like I just thought there was a lot of like the discourse was just so toxic, and some of it, people just said things to just fit their own agenda or their own narrative. And it's like, I think we can look at both sides here. I felt like Braggs did a good job of doing that because he was clearly a Caleb guy, but he also wanted Justin Fields to be good. And he thought that with the right guys, Fields could be a good quarterback. So,
well, like you said, it's kind of like politics with Fields. It was all the way this way or all the way this way. I'm the guy. So you might hop off when I said this. I said from the get-go, don't draft him. I was that guy.
Oh, really? You're never that guy? Okay.
Well, because at the time I said, what's more important? I said the offensive line is kind of whatever.
Yeah.
And I said, don't draft him. They drafted him. I didn't like it. But at the end of the day, I was like, well, we're stuck with him. Let's just see. And I kind of like you said, the fans were either he's a Super Bowl quarterback that's going to do great things. And I was like, he's not that guy.
Yeah.
He's a guy that can. I'll never say he's not athletic. I'll never say he's not a hard worker. I like the way he conducted himself in interviews, which is huge. He only had one mishap, which was about the comments about the coaches, and that was it. And if that's all it was, good for you. I just was never the guy that said he's going to win you 10, 12, 13 games ever because of the inconsistency of throwing. But I was also the guy that was able to reason with people and say the situation wasn't great. But if you're, it's kind of like the LeBron thing. If you're that good, if you're saying he's that good, you overcome that stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of where it came from. So some of my hatred came from maybe Bears Twitter and fans. I'm like, now if he sat for a year or two, I think he could be really like if he sat behind Russell Wilson for 2 years, if that's what the situation he was put into, I think he could be decently good, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. But I
Yeah.
also think Bears Twitter got too much into his athleticism makes him a good quarterback. And I said those sometimes don't go hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
Michael Vick was one of those in a lifetime type of guys.
Mm,
Fields is whatever.
yeah.
But going into the trade, I said, you know what? Keep him because we know what we're going to get from him. If you get Caleb Williams, I have no idea what you're about to get from him. If
Mm,
you keep Fields, at least we know there's more weapons. If you draft an O lineman, like this would have been the year for no excuses, right? Like
yeah.
you have an
Yeah.
actual OC coming in, you have weapons. So that was kind of like my thing. I'm very
Mhm.
reasonable when it comes to it to an extent. But it was the people that were saying he's top five quarterback. I'm like, no, hold on a second.
Even I didn't think that. And I was a guy who supported him and wanted him to,
Right.
be here. So I guess, you know, I, a lot of how I felt was a lot of emotion, a lot from the emotional side,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like he was put in such a bad situation, dude. Like get drafted in the lame duck year of Matt Nagy and Ryan
Mm-hmm.
Pace.
Yep.
He makes his debut in that game against the Browns and gets sacked like way too many times. Like it was just a bad situation. Then in year two, the Bears purposely tried to lose games. You
Mm-hmm.
know, he was the only reason people even wanted to watch the team to begin with.
Yep.
And so then this year, in my opinion, he wasn't the full on reason they didn't make the playoffs. In my opinion, Matt Eberflus had everything to do with them blowing those three
Mm-hmm.
games when they had 10-point leads in the fourth quarter, and he
Mm-hmm.
gets to keep his job. And if they win those 3 games, they win 10 games, and I believe they get in the playoffs, you know?
Yep.
So how would have this conversation gone, this debate gone if they had made the playoffs? Say they make the playoffs and they even fucked around and won a game. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like I'm glad we don't have to go through that. But my point is that what the situation really does matter a lot for him, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not to necessarily say that he would have been a top 5 quarterback in the NFL or anything, but at least one that you can feel good with as a
Yep.
starter, you
Yep.
know? And it just, to me, the first 2 years, it wasn't very fair. And I think he certainly deserves more criticism in year 3. But to me, I blame the coach for the 3 of the games that they lost that they should have won. And, on top of that, the games that they did lose, the Chiefs game, that's one of the most embarrassing losses I ever watched. He
Mm-hmm.
was terrible against the Packers week 1, and he wasn't good against the Packers the last game of the year either. So like it's all fair to criticize from that end as well. But to me, I'm never going to understand the people who think he just isn't like a starter. I think that you put the right pieces around him, you have a good coach and a good culture around him, I think he can win you games and you can go to the playoffs. But as we know, as Bears fans, they just never can seem to get this all right. So I hope with whoever they take now, man, I hope that we see one game from the guy and at least we're bought in and we can stop having this conversation. Because even after the trade has happened, we have one side of the fan base that is calling it a mistake, and then the other side of the fan base that's like, all right, we're all in. And it's just like, at some point, this fan base has got to come together and embrace whoever it is. And hopefully they get it right. Like that's
Well,
all I could say.
well, again, it's because of the fan base. Like
Yeah.
if maybe if the fan base wasn't the way it was, maybe I'd be sitting here saying differently to draft him at the time.
Yeah.
Maybe because I hate Ohio State and I look at Ohio State and I'm like, but I had like all 2022 film on him and I watched it and because I'm a football coach,
Sure.
I break it down and I go, I don't know if he was I don't think he was a starter coming into the NFL. That was just my own opinion, only because he had 2 running backs at Ohio State that averaged over 120 yards a game. He
Yeah.
had number one wide receivers. His O line went in the first round, and I'm like, this is why he holds onto the ball too long. He has
Mm,
I call it happy feet. He wants to run and everything else. That's
yeah.
why he was a guy that should sit for a year or two, you know. But also it was the fan base. Like I have plenty of Bears episodes on my podcast criticizing Fields, but I was also, while criticizing him, I said, but I'm going to blame everybody. Like, I want to
Yeah.
blame everybody. I blame him. I blame the O line. I blame the head coach. I blame some games
Yeah.
the head coach's fault. Sometimes it is Fields' fault. Sometimes it's the wide receiver's fault. But like the fans wanted to blame just the O line. The fans just wanted to blame this. And I was the guy that said, why can't we blame everybody? Yeah, he
Yeah.
did play well against certain teams. And
Yeah.
sometimes the O line played well. Sometimes the O line looked like shit.
Right.
Sometimes the receivers couldn't catch a cold. Matt Eberflus doesn't call timeouts in certain situations. It's like I'm blaming everybody, but the fan base wants to. It was the LeBron effect, is what I called it. Was that?
Yeah.
Again,
I admit it. I'll admit that I probably defended the guy more than I should have.
which is fine. None of it.
Yeah.
Like, at least you would be a little bit more reasonable than like the random people on there.
Yeah.
Like you with Cubs and Cardinals was me with Bears. Like I would post stuff and they come after me like, you're a high school coach. I feel bad for those high school kids. You don't know shit from anything. And I would be like, well, what are you doing to help kids? Like I would come back at them and like, or I would ask them a question. I'd be like, do you know what a mesh route is? Do you know what this is? Do you understand what this is? And then they would
Yeah.
just, fuck you. And I'm like, well, that's a
Yeah.
good comeback. There you go.
Well, with you being a coach, you probably know more than I did. And so, listen, like I guess in some ways you weren't necessarily wrong, right?
Well,
Like you didn't want them to take him, and then everything that you said happened. Like in
yeah,
terms of like your concerns about him as a quarterback coming out of Ohio State. Like, I mean,
yeah. And
CJ Stroud is like the outlier at this point. But,
I did not expect that though. When they took him, I was like, oh, this is Ohio State quarterback. It's not going to go well. And then
yeah.
he does that. So then I use that against Justin Fields. I was like, well, look at CJ Stroud. But but I didn't do that on purpose. That was me stirring the pot with certain Twitter. I'd be like, well, what
Yes.
about this? Now some people would take it seriously, and I'm like, guys, like he just might it just people he probably had no pressure on him.
Right.
Like, you're at Houston. Like you're not in
Yeah.
the market of Chicago. There's no pressure.
Your way of stirring the pot is me on Cubs Twitter, just like supporting all the players that everyone loves to like bitch about and complain about.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Like I purposely will support like Miles Mastroboni for
Yeah.
no reason other than the fact that I know that Cubs Twitter wishes this guy was released already. And like there's a woman who watches CHGO Cubs. She's in our YouTube chat every single day. Her name is Barb. She's like 83 years old, and she cannot stand Jose Cuas. Can't stand Jose Cuas. And so like I purposely just like I'm Jose Cuas's biggest fan going into the season, because I'm just, first off, she's a little irrational with it, because it's like, okay, yes, Nelson Velasquez he hit that grand slam that one time, but if you look at his numbers in AAA and you look at what he's done as a major leaguer, okay, he had 2 good months with the Royals last year. Can he do it for a full year? Can he do it for a full year for a team that's actually good, right? And Jose Cuas, the Cubs, I believe, vision him as someone like what Scott Efros was, which is a reliever that they had in 2022 that they ended up trading for Hayden Wesneski from the Yankees. And Scott Efros at this point, the Cubs have gotten more value out of Wesneski because Scott Efros ended up having to have Tommy John surgery. Anyway, the point is that Scott Efros had that like sidearm delivery, just like Jose Cuas. And so I think the Cubs put him in the pitch lab, as they call it, this offseason, and have been trying to work with him on, getting better. And I think that they moved Velasquez to get what I guess we could call a lottery ticket to try and turn Jose Cuas into something that maybe the Royals never thought he could be. And the Cubs have done that a lot with other guys. He's young. He's got a lot of control. Like Velasquez, he could go on and hit be a 20 home run guy a season, but I don't know where you can look at this roster and be like, where's Nelson Velasquez like to me, it was one of those like, move a guy so he gets his opportunity, and you get in return, you get a pitcher with high upside. So, and the way that the Cubs have developed homegrown guys in the bullpen, at least in recent years, or just found dudes that can come in and be good, it gives me some optimism. But
Right.
I didn't expect to be talking about Jose Cuas on this show, but I I guess my point is that like I kind of like to take a lot of the players that fans complain about and just blindly kind of support them and try and just give it a different little thing. But and in turn, it does kind of stir the pot a little bit because it
Right.
gets fans to react. But also, it's kind of like I'm zigging while everyone else zags, right?
Right.
So, you know.
That's okay though. That's what Barstool does. Might as well just do the same thing.
Yeah, with certain things, like I just feel like being a little bit different when it comes to these types of topics or related to whatever team we're talking about. In this case the Cubs. For me, like I just don't want to be like all the other Cubs content people that are out there on social media. Not that I don't respect a lot of what those guys do. I'm friends with a lot of them. But I don't want to be I want to stick out as being something different, right? And
Right.
so I think a lot of fans do understand like the bit behind it. I think they do.
Right.
At least the ones who have followed me for a long time, they know that I will do that just because I just get tired of seeing people bitch about the same guy every single day. So I'll just, for the sake of it, I'll just like, all right, I'm believing in this guy for however long and then when he starts to hit, you guys can thank me because I supported him, like
Right.
that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's a unique thing, I think. It's kind of my style. So yeah,
But that's okay. It's okay.
yeah.
Uh, this isn't an interview, but I am curious. How'd you end up at CHGO? It's not an interview, but I am curious.
It's not an interview.
It's not.
uh
I'm not about interviews. I'm about having conversation like we are
yeah,
now. And I
no,
do
no.
college football coach. I do the same thing. I'm like, this is not an
Yeah.
interview. I had a coach on, we just talked about WWE the whole time, and it was
Oh,
like talking
nice.
about football. And he goes,
Yeah.
"Talk football every day. Let's talk about something else." And I'm like, "You got it, man.
WrestleMania is around the corner, by the way. I can't
It
wait.
is."
So how I got to CHGO, it's a very long path, a lot of hard work, a lot of doing a lot of shit for free, a lot of networking. I think networking is a main reason why I'm here. So when I was at Eastern, I got a journalism degree there. I actually wanted to be a reporter when I was in school. At the time, I wish I had kind of realized how the podcasting game was evolving,
Mhm.
and how social media and building brands and stuff. If I had known how like all this stuff worked in college, I mean, shit, I could have been somewhere like this probably a lot sooner. But better late than never, as always. I guess. But so I did like student media at Eastern. I did like I wrote for the Den, Daily Eastern News, for like a couple semesters, very part-time ish. Probably didn't put enough effort into it, to be honest with you. I did the yearbook, but I think my real passion that I actually didn't realize until my senior year was when I worked at the radio station.
Mhm.
Um, and at the time when I did, I was like, man, I wish I had done this for like another year. And
Right.
so at the time, I didn't have the confidence to like apply for any radio jobs because I'd only done radio for a year at Eastern. Um, and so I just always thought, okay, I'm going to go try and be a journalist, all this stuff. I wanted to be a sports journalist, find my way into the Chicago market somehow, some way, if everything worked out the way I wanted. And then when I was there, all the teachers, professors, they all like preached, you gotta take whatever job you can get and then just try and build your way up and
Mhm.
network and all these things. And I took first job I got out of college, and I always tell people it was like one of the biggest regrets I've had in my career because I took a job that I hated about a month in. And I think I lasted there about 5 months until I got my next job. And the first job, I was like a general assignment reporter in this like small town just south of Kankakee. And I was like going to board meetings and like
Mm,
just shit that I
yeah.
did not want to do. But I did it because, or I applied for it because like the professors really just like emphasize like just doing whatever you can to get your to start building your resume once you get out of school. And I had an internship on my resume, but that was it. So I was like, all right, I got to do something. I got to start making money because these student loans are about to start hit the
Yeah.
hit. And I understood the process, right? So anyway, I hated that job because it just wasn't in sports. So I kept applying for like sports reporter jobs, and I ended up getting high school sports like assistant sports editor over at an affiliate of the Peoria Journal Star. It was in Pekin, but it was under that umbrella of the Journal Star. And I spent a lot of time in like East Peoria, Morton,
Mhm.
Washington, covering like high school sports. And I did that for about a year. And in the same time, I picked up like a part-time promotions job at a radio group there in Peoria. And they had an ESPN affiliate. I helped run their soundboard. They'd let me come on their one daily show that they had on there, every now and then. And it was like, I felt like I was really building my resume with that on top of doing this reporting job. I had no time. And at the same time, I was like not really making any good money. So in the end, it all led to me getting really burnt out. I think I ended up moving back home with my mom in like 2017, like in the summer of 2017. And at that time, I kind of decided that I was just like going to shift to like social media marketing,
Yep.
just because I just wanted something more consistent. Like my work life balance wasn't good. And again, I was exhausted and tired from like doing all this work and making no money. And so I did that. I went and worked at this like environmental services company in Ottawa, Illinois, and um, I worked in their communications department. And I just like the to be completely blunt, the company was ran by a bunch of old people who didn't know how to use social media.
Right.
And they just gave me the keys to the car and was like, fix this, like make
Yeah.
this good. I was like, okay, I barely know what the hell we're trying to sell here, but I'll try and make it better. All right. Um, it, for work-life balance, it was a great job. I loved the people that I worked with, all this stuff. I always I still had this like passion for like sports, and I wanted to do something in sports and media and all this stuff. And over the time, I kind of wrote a little bit for Fansided on the side, and then I ended up quitting that because I didn't really like the people that I worked with.
Mhm.
Um, and again, like I got kind of burnt out on just doing that, and I think it was right around um the end of 2019 where I started to get that little itch of like, okay, I need to do something myself, like on my
Right.
own, whatever.
Right.
And so I started my own Chicago sports podcast with this buddy I went to college with, who's actually from Charleston, by the way. Um,
Oh boy.
and and he lives up here in Chicago now too. But anyway, we of course we started at like the wrong time. Like we literally debuted our first episode at the beginning of 2020. And so like
Hmm.
we had sports to talk about for 3 months. And then the pandemic came and sports were canceled.
Yeah.
So the podcast kind of turned into like just some crazy shit at times. We really like used those episodes of The Last Dance to like,
Hmm.
you know,
Yep.
turn into like long episodes of just talking about that kind of shit. And we had I think the best thing that podcast did for me was it helped me really network, because
Yep.
I would do like exactly what you did with me. Like I just DM people and be like, hey, you want to come on my podcast, blah blah blah. And
Mhm.
one of the people I had come on my podcast was Kevin Kaduck, who's the head of content at CHGO now. And at the time he was promoting his newsletter that he was doing. And we he came on my show. I promoted his stuff. He promoted us. It was great. And then, we remained, internet friends for the next couple of years. And I lost my job right at when the pandemic started. So, I was getting unemployment, just hanging out at home, like trying to distract myself from the fact that the world was burning. And like just going through all the anxiety of the pandemic that we all went through. Um, through all that, the website on Tap Sportsnet, I saw their Cubs Twitter account, Cubs on Tap, tweet that they're looking for Cubs writers, and I don't even know how I came across the account because I don't even think I followed it, but maybe someone retweeted it or something, like someone I knew did or something. I don't know what it was, but at the time I was just like, well, I don't have a job, and I guess like I have time now.
Yeah.
So I'm doing my podcast. I applied for that. I end up talking to some other guys. They bring me on, and they let me be part of the Cubs podcast or whatever that they did. And so I was doing my own podcast on top of their Cubs podcast. And over time, I started to like kind of build my brand a little bit
Mhm.
without realizing it. I think whenever that ESPN 30 for 30 came out about Sammy Sosa and Mark McGuire's um what do you call it? The home run race in 98 when that documentary came out. I remember sending a tweet. I just listed all the players that wore 21 after Sammy Sosa like left the Cubs, and it's just a very disgusting list, by the way. Um, and the tweet like blew up, went viral, whatever. It was like the first time I ever experienced what it was like to like go viral on Twitter or whatever. And I started getting followers off it and all this stuff. And I realized that, oh, this is how people build followings. Like they
Right.
just kind of pick their niche and then they tweet shit like that. And
Right.
um so I that's kind of how it started. And I really learned along the way of like how to build my name on social media and all these things. And I ended up getting another job up in Evanston at the end of the year. And so I was doing my full-time job, doing my podcast, doing this Cubs podcast for the next from December 2020 all the way up until February 2022. So for a good year and year and a half of just like I was grinding because it got to a point where I kind of became like I kind of my fire was kind of relit.
Right.
I wasn't burnt out, and I was just doing at that point in my life, I was just kind of doing the podcast and stuff just for the love of sports and the
Right.
Cubs and Chicago sports in general. It wasn't that I was doing it because I had to or that because I was trying to make any money. I was legitimately just doing it because I wanted to.
Mhm.
Um, and I was in my full-time job and everything. It was in a good spot, and I was content with it. I thought where I thought I'd be there for at least 5 years. And then when All City decides to come to Chicago, and Kevin is DMing me on Twitter in February of 2022, tells me that he has this cool opportunity. Can I talk to you about it? And I had only talked to him like on Zoom or whatever a couple
Right.
times. We weren't like some huge friend or anything. Um, I was like, okay. It was like a Friday at like 3 p.m. I was working remote and like not really doing my job. And so I take his phone call at that point again, like in February 2022, after doing all this stuff. At this point, I've kind of built my brand, had like going on 2,000 followers on Twitter, which isn't a huge number, but like it was a bigger number than when I first met Kevin on social media. And like I had learned a lot at that point on how to do podcasts and brand growing and all this stuff. And anyway, I take this call and he tells me all about CHGO and how like they want me to come and be part of the Cubs podcast and
Mhm.
do this and that. And I legitimately said to him, like, you're punking me, right? Like this isn't this is a sick joke.
Right.
And I just remember saying, I had to talk to my mom and my girlfriend about it. And I think I texted him, or yeah, I think I texted him like 4 hours later and was like, all right, I'm in. And yeah, uh yeah, and then the rest is kind of history. My life really changed so much ever since that conversation. And yeah, now I get to talk about the Cubs for a living. It's really a dream come true. And I when I say it was a long path, like, man, if I could go back and teach myself or tell myself how to do this and that, like, I man, I was definitely better off doing some. If I had done radio at least in college a little bit longer, maybe I would have got here a little quicker. I think whenever I was in college, I just thought if I'm a reporter, I'll be able to interact with athletes and write
Hmm.
stories about athletes, like I never really considered the other avenues I could have taken. And again, when I was in college, like podcasts weren't really like a thing
No,
yet,
no.
they didn't really blow up until after I graduated. And man, I just wish I had known that. I think that I could I could have really taken advantage of such a growing thing
Yep.
that's now so heavily saturated. But it is what it is. And again, I give credit for myself. I give myself credit for networking really well, being really nice to a lot of people. I think I have a good reputation with people in this business here in the city, for at least the ones that know me. And yeah, so yeah, it was a very long road. There's a lot of mistakes made along the way, but you know, um, I learned a lot, and man, it's just excited to keep it going, man. It really is just one of those things that sometimes I'm sitting here or I'm in bed and I'm thinking like, man, I a lot of people would like kill to be able to do what I do. So I don't take any of it for granted.
And I'm one of them. Just let you know. Because it looks fun.
It is fun. It is like, listen, every job has its like, things that you bitch about or whatever. But at the end of
Right.
the day, like I go to our studio in West Loop 5 days a week, 4 or 5 days a week, and talk about my favorite baseball team.
Right.
Um, there are again, there are things behind the scenes that like you can that anyone at any job can say, oh yeah, like we need to work on this, or this person pissed me off today, whatever. But that's at every job.
Oh
But
yeah.
the whole the entire idea of what I get to do and the people I've met and the athletes that I've got to meet too, yeah, like it's definitely something that if you had told me I've been doing this like 5 years ago, I would have laughed in your face, been like, how the fuck did I get there? Because five
Right.
years ago, I had pretty much given up on my media career. And now here we are 2 years into, or yeah, 2 years into CHGO. And um, it's like, it's still kind of like mind blowing that I'm doing this. So
Right.
it's truly a blessing for real.
Well, that's awesome. That's why I wanted to know because I don't know how any of it works. This podcast thing, I jumped right into it like you did. I started in February of 2020. It was
Yeah.
supposed to be like what you guys are doing. It wasn't supposed to be what I do now. And then COVID hits and you're like, well, shit, there's no sports. And
Yeah.
so football coaches started their own podcast. Like I said, it got really saturated because it
Hmm.
kind of blew up because we had nothing else to do. And it just turned into what I do now is talk to football coaches. I talk about Illinois. I talk about the Bears, do whatever I want.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal at all. I don't make money, but like it's
Yeah.
fun. I have my real
Yeah.
job, but like, man, like what you guys are doing is what I wanted to do, but
Hmm.
don't know how to do it. Like, I just now learned how to edit photos because I don't want to do it. I'm like, I'm just learning this. I'm learning this on my own. No one teaches you. You just kind of have to
Yeah.
do it. And that's just kind
Right.
of what's happening now.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell this to people like when I go on their shows and stuff, like depending on what you're wanting to do, like I think the number one thing is you just got to enjoy what you're doing because again, like you just said, it is so saturated. So that's like my number one thing that I kind of told myself whenever I started getting into it a few years ago, like if you get to a point to where you're just not having fun doing it anymore, then like you're going to have to stop.
Right.
But I was very motivated and very like persistent and passionate about what I was doing when I was with On Tap Sportsnet before I got the job at CHGO. And when I was with them, like they didn't pay me. I was doing it all for free. I did so much with them that helped grow their brand, their Cubs podcast specifically. And like their like president, founder, whatever, like he was pissed whenever I left because he knew that I was gonna get poached. And
Mhm.
he wished me all the luck. He was happy for me that I was able to get a job in the industry. It's something that all of those guys were trying to do. And um, like the experience with them is probably something that I also don't take for granted, because like I really learned a lot about brand building and all this stuff that you have to do to grow your show and yourself, in terms of finding a way to become popular, all these things with, whatever you're trying to become popular within. For me, it's Cubs fans and baseball, all these things, right? So it was, it's kind of nice to know that like that he was pretty pissed that I was leaving, because it just
Right.
felt I got to understand how much I was worth to him and other people. But yeah, so I just kind of ride with that same mentality with this job now. Like, I never want to feel like I never want to get to a point to where I'm like burnt out or anything like that. And I won't lie, like when we get in season and we're doing pre and post game shows every single day except on Saturdays and Sundays, it can get to be a grind for sure.
Mhm.
But um, you know, eh, you find ways to enjoy it, and you find new bits, and you find new new things to talk about, and you just ride with it, and you hope that other people enjoy it, and if they do, they come back. And like, so whenever when you're starting out, whether you're trying to build something big or not, like I think as long as you're doing it for just the love of whatever you're talking about or whatever is all that matters. And if you network with the right person or this or that, like it could lead to something, because that's basically
Right.
all that happened for me. Like, I didn't apply for this job. They basically like came and recruited me. You know what I mean?
Right.
So um the industry is one of the toughest for sure. And that's why at the beginning, I was so burnt out, because I got tired of applying for other media jobs and being told no because I didn't
Right.
have any experience, or because they just didn't know who I was, and all these little things. Right. So, um, yeah, there's no easy path. And that's unfortunate to say. Like, I wish it was different. I wish that, a lot of these jobs were out there for the everyday person that just wants to talk about sports, but just isn't that way, unfortunately.
No, it's tough, especially
Yeah.
when you don't see your channel growing. That's what I do all the time. Like it's not growing, but I'm not promoting it all the time. I'm not doing, I don't know how that works. I don't understand
Mm,
it because I'm dumb. I'm a dumb country boy. I don't understand any of it, but I also work a full-time job. So the last thing I'm going to do is promote it, but it
yeah.
is working because our college coaches, I go, oh, hey, Steve. And I'm like, what? They're like, oh, yeah, I saw you talk to so and so. So it's slowly working.
There you
It's
go.
slowly getting there, but we'll see. Because again, I'm a laid back person. So when you talk to coaches, there's supposed to be topics. And I'm like,
Hmm.
no, this is Joe Rogan style, man. Whatever we talk about is what's about to happen.
I
And
would, I think that for you, like, I know we're not live right now, but like if you were to do this live on YouTube, it opens the opportunity for new people to find you with
yep.
the action of like with the process of SEO and tagging the right things. Like, if you have another college coach on your show, then you can put that guy's name in your title, and like I'm sure people will be searching that guy at some point, right? Like,
Right.
I think that's what a lot of people do is they do this on YouTube, and they go live a lot, and they're able to tag it the way that to get people to come or find it. So um that's just the new wave of like podcasting and stuff. So
Well, I'd figured that out last year because I would always do an Illinois basketball pregame or football, and those
um,
videos do decently well. And I
yeah.
realized that. But this year,
Mhm.
just had football, I had time. Basketball season, I have like no time because Illinois
uh
schedule was always screwed up. Like they're playing at
mhm.
7 p.m. They're playing, and I'm like, well, I have my own basketball game to go coach. I'm not getting home. Football, I make time because it's easier. You know,
Saturdays, yeah.
Saturday's so much easier. But like, I realized that because like it was doing well, and I was like, if I continue to do this for another year, it might roll into something. So this year
Sure.
was gung ho, like we're gonna do it. And then I got here and I was like, I can't. Like the way the schedule. And then some are on Peacock, some are on this, and you're like, God damn it! Like I got to pay for Peacock in order to watch them, or
Yeah.
the Big Ten Network. You got to find a way to watch them, and which I
Yeah, it
did.
was annoying when Illinois was on like Big Ten Plus, like
Oh, I
at the
know.
beginning of the year against like, I don't know, Valpo or some shit like that.
Yeah, it made no sense, but
Yeah.
it's all about the money.
Yeah.
So, but I realize that when you go live and do that stuff, eventually it works. Eventually it
Mhm.
does it. It may not do it right while you're live, but then later on it's going to come around.
Yeah.
Uh, I figured that stuff I figured out. I just got to, if I actually put my mind to it, I think I can figure it out, which I'm slowly
Sure.
doing. I'm slowly getting there.
Yeah.
But like I said, it was just all about talking to coaches. Like it didn't matter. Like when I get Bart Miller from U of I on, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm talking to him. And then the video may not do well. Then I get mad.
Mhm.
I'm like, why is he not doing well? Because he's,
Mhm.
especially when Illinois was good
Yeah.
when they were 8-5. I'm like, why is that one video not doing well? Then they
Yeah.
were bad last year, bad. I'm like, oh, this is why, because they're not doing so hot.
Yeah. As far as like doing my Illini stuff on the side for a large part of it is to build my YouTube channel, but it's mainly just because we don't do any college stuff at CHGO. Um, it's the numbers are so different. Like I'll have random ones that only get like 200 or 300 views, and then I'll have other ones that have gotten a couple thousand, and it's just
Yep.
based off, I know it's all based off of what people are searching or whatever, but sometimes if the game is important, then like people will come. So like for instance, I just did a show last night talking about Sweet 16, going to the Sweet 16, and I was hopeful that maybe the video would get 1,000 views, and it hasn't happened. It's at like 500. I'm like, there should be more here. This is supposed to be the prime moment for me on doing the show right now. And so it's a little frustrating, but I also don't know all of the SEO stuff and what's important and what if I'm tagging things correctly. I've been trying to teach myself how to do all that, but it's oh man.
Well, it's
I don't
also
even know how to explain it.
you almost have to do it right after the game's over. That's when, like, you got to do when the iron's hot. If you wait a
Mhm.
day, then it's like, well, they already seen everything. So if you do it right after, that's what I did.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
that's what I would do last year. Right. If it was a big game and they won, I hopped right on and then I'd wake up and there's hundreds of views when you woke up and you're like, okay. Then if I waited a day, I'm like, oh, this has gotten 100.
Yeah.
Shouldn't this be a big deal? Or
That's a good point too. I just Saturday night I was with friends out at the bar watching the game. So yeah.
yeah, I was at my parents' house, so like I don't have the stuff. And
Yeah.
if I did,
Yeah.
I would have hopped on right by myself and done it myself. But like
Yeah.
I almost did, I was pull my phone out to do it, but I was like, nah, I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Then this Thursday they're gonna play at 9:10. I don't know if I'll be awake to keep it.
Well, it's going to be a roller coaster for me because the Cubs open up the season
Yeah, they open up
on Thursday
yeah,
too. And so I have like for CHGO, I got to do I have to do our post game show. We're doing it at a bar here in Wrigley. And so like I'm probably going to miss a lot of the first half, but I'm hoping that by the time our show is over, the second half will be starting or something like that. So I don't know,
right,
but it's just going to be like, all right, I got to like my job is most important here, but
right.
also like Illinois is in the Sweet 16 for the first time since I was like 14. So I'm
It's a
trying
big
to like
deal.
do both things.
You need to have your phone during the thing, like where nobody can see it, and you're just kind of your Cub
Yeah,
stuff here, like write it down, and then you got the Illinois game here. Like, okay,
right. Yeah,
okay.
I should probably just have the game on my phone whenever we're sitting at the desk. I'll just make sure it's muted or whatever, and I can just. But
Well,
yeah,
because
no.
I saw
Go
your
ahead.
video about the Brad Underwood haters, and I loved it because they've wanted him fired for a very long time.
Oh my god,
And
I don't understand the Brad Underwood haters, man. I really don't.
well, because Illinois, me and my friends said this, it's like we finally become relevant again. now we
Mhm.
think we're too good, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like it's like, well, now we expect a national championship. And I'm like, do you realize where we were between this year and this year?
Mhm.
Like, you idiots. Like, if you fire, who are you going to hire?
Yeah, exactly. Like, who are you gonna hire that's better, and who are you gonna hire that is gonna bring the same consistency? I just think so many people think it's just so easy to be able to get in the NCAA tournament and go to the national title every year. Like, it's not like even like Duke, who's what's is a blue blood. Like, even Duke isn't doing that. Like,
Oh,
even with in the last few years of Coach K, they weren't doing that. Like UNC might be the outlier, just like a handful of years ago. In the last couple of years of Roy Williams' career, like went to the national title game like consecutive years, won one, lost the other, right? Um, yeah, like shit, like our one of our rivals, Purdue, like they've been so good for so long, but then they get in the tournament and they've been losing these double digit seeds, and it's just like, are they going to fire Matt Painter? They
no.
shouldn't. Like, he's been great there. He's all he does is win. He's missed
Oh,
the tournament like 4 times his entire time at Purdue, and he's been there like my entire life. And so, to me, the way I look at it is, I just I want Illinois to always be in the running to make the tournament. And like, I felt like during the gross years and the end of Bruce Weber's tenure, like you were like praying that that was going to
mhm.
happen.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, we're competing for Big Ten titles too.
Yeah.
And we're bringing guys in who are going to the NBA and, or at least playing professionally. And, um, like they just, it's just like a new set of dudes every year that are coming in and, you know, living up to the standard that Brad Underwood has built. And the one year where, outside of those first couple where he was rebuilding the program, the one year where, I guess you can argue that, for more criticism for him was probably last season.
Hmm.
I think that was a lot more of just internal locker room. Like, a lot of those players didn't get along the way that, they should. And, like Brad Underwood gets a lot of criticism because of guys who've transferred, but it's like a lot of, like, almost all those guys who have transferred, except for Brandon Podsminski, have gone on and haven't exactly done better.
And
Adam
transferred
Miller,
again.
yeah, Adam Miller, who for whatever reason, he left and goes to LSU. Unfortunately, tears his ACL, so I feel bad for him there. But comes back, isn't very good his next year, and then he transfers to Arizona State, and they weren't good. They didn't make the tournament. Jaden Epps, Georgetown, terrible this year, right? They'll probably be better next year though. But whatever, either way, not good. Sky Clark has just entered the transfer portal
Yep.
again,
Yep.
right? He's going to leave Louisville, and they've had some other guys who have left too, but like those are the names that everyone talks about, and it's just like, who cares? You're the guys who want to be here are going to be here, and the guys who want to transfer here are going to transfer here. And I'll give Brad credit for just kind of owning the transfer portal, like
Oh, yeah. He
Marcus
exceeded it last
Damas.
year.
Yeah, Marcus Damas, a great transfer this year. Dane Danger's been a great transfer. Obviously, Terrence Shannon's been a great transfer that he's brought in. Not this year, but the year before. Like, he's brought in some guys that have transferred over the years, and he's turned them into really good players. It put them in a system that they can excel in, right? So, I'm I'm all aboard the Brad Underwood trade or train for as long as he will let us. I mean,
Well,
I,
because when people transferred, I don't know if you saw it, I did, was
Mhm.
they don't like Brad Underwood. The players don't get along with him.
Yeah.
They find the photos of him like screaming, and they're like, "Why would you play for?" I remember that last year, the year before,
Oh yeah, the Northwestern game. Yeah.
he was yelling and freaking out, and they were posting like, who would ever want to play for this guy? And I retweeted. I'm like, I would. Like, this is the coach. Like, what are we
Yeah.
talking about?
Right.
Oh, these guys just don't understand him and they're going to leave. They leave because of him. Look at all these players that left. And I said, but doesn't it say something that Terrence Shannon Jr. wanted to come back? Coleman Hawkins wanted
Mhm.
to come back.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
Eric
and like
Ford
even
did.
this year. even this year, like I think there was some conversation of Dre Gibbs Lawhorn probably trying to transfer after his
Yeah,
1 year.
yeah,
And I think it's looking more so likely that he's going to stay now based off how the rest of the season has played out. And, even Dane Danger, I thought he was someone who could transfer mid-season just because he was getting like 2 minutes a game. And now
hmm
he's like out there for at least 10 to 15 minutes a game. And he's become a huge part of how this team is excelling right now.
right.
Um, you know, like winning cures a lot of stuff, right? No doubt. And we're talking all this right now when Illinois is about to play in the Sweet 16 on Thursday. And they look really good and they're exciting and all these things. They have the best offense in the country, according to Ken Palm, all these things. But I'm not saying you can't criticize Brad Underwood for certain things. The one thing I've always said is I feel like his in-game adjustments could use some
hmm
work. And perhaps, maybe if he could find a way to make changes a little bit quicker, sure. But at the same time, we're winning 20 games every season. We're going to the NCAA tournament. We're battling for the top of the Big Ten every single year. I can have those criticisms, but I can also recognize that, like, man, like Josh Whitman hit a home run on this hire.
Yes,
Like
yes.
it's not something that I'm going to take for granted. It's like I just don't. The people who don't like him, I'm just kind of like, do you remember when like
hmm
LaRon Black and Kendrick Nunn were getting arrested and
Yes.
like this team wasn't even close to making the NCAA tournament, lost like so many games that last year of John Gross, and oh my, it was just a mess. And the fact that neither Gross or Bruce Weber could recruit either, like
Mhm.
Io DeSumo from Chicago comes to Illinois. Oh, Terrence Shannon, who you did recruit, he ends up going to Texas Tech, but he's also from Chicago, decides to transfer to Illinois. Like
Mhm.
it, like Justin Harmon from Chicago, like those two guys struggled so much at recruiting in Chicago, and it was so notably talked about so much. So many guys from Chicago that end up like going somewhere else, like Derrick Rose, for example, Jabari Parker, like that didn't like Jabari Parker went to Duke and Anthony Davis went to Kentucky. Like all these dudes,
Who
that
was the
from
guy that went to
Chicago.
Indiana and there was that big thing that happened? What was his name?
Um.
You know what I'm talking about? Like that point guard from Indiana and like
Was it
Illinois.
Eric Gordon?
Yeah, like that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I remember the Eric Gordon stuff. Man, I was young for that, but yeah, I do remember
I'm old. I'm old, so I remember all that.
it. But like again, like he's recruiting better than any coach that they've had outside of Bill Self, who recruited all those guys from the Final Four team, right? So, um, yeah, it's just I don't understand the Brad Underwood haters, man. Like no coach is perfect, but man, he's built this program back up to like something we can all be proud of and look forward to the future and just expect to, be in the running for Big Ten titles every year and get into the tournament and maybe get hot and do what we're doing this year.
Well, that was the other criticism. He can't get out of the weekend, and then the
Right.
coach should fire him
Right.
because he can't get out of the weekend. And I'm like, I would rather make it and have a chance than
Yeah.
lose 18 games and be like, well, at least we're better than Northwestern's good now, but back then, like I guess we're better than Northwestern. That's about
Yeah.
it. Everybody else is good.
Right. And also, like, I think some of these fans need to realize that, the consistency of that he's doing. Again, more wins than any coach in the Big Ten the last 5 years. And, Jawan Howard won a coach of the year a few years ago, and he just lost his
Oh,
job. Michigan just had their worst season in a very, very long time. Chris Holtman was fired, and,
mhm.
Ohio State, had some good years with him. Like, Mike Woodson, took, Indiana had a lot of expectations the year before with Trace Jackson Davis and everyone else that they had there. And they made a decent run, but obviously didn't go as far as they wanted. And then this year, like they were terrible. I know they had a lot of injuries or whatever, but shit, their number one recruit that they had decommitted. And like there's a lot of issues there. And Indiana still calls himself a blue blood, right?
Oh, I
Like
know.
which is laugh out loud funny. But like you look at teams across the Big Ten right now, you look at the teams that, especially that for me at least, you're just used to them being good. And you're like, wow, Illinois is better than all of them. Purdue is the only one that you can say that Illinois isn't better than in terms of just overall success over a long period of time. Like Purdue has been very consistently good during the Matt Painter era. They just haven't won a national title. They haven't got to a Final Four, but they've had some deep runs. They've also had some very quick runs like last year too, right? But at the end of the day, if I was a Purdue fan, I just as hurt as I'd been by St. Peter's and Fairleigh Dickinson and North Texas, it's like you're still at the top of the Big Ten every year, and the Big Ten is one of the best conferences in college basketball year in and year out. Maybe not so much this year, but like over the course of time, it has been. And I don't know. It's just the way that I look at things. I guess at some certain point, you got to get to a point where you're expecting a Final Four, at least someone in there. I think that's what Purdue fans are expecting this year. Like it's either Final Four or bust, national championship game or bust for Purdue fans, right? But eventually, I feel like Illinois can get to those types of expectations in time. Like again, he's been at Illinois for like what, 7 years, something like that, and and 5 of them we've been, one of the best teams in conference. So to me, it's like, there's no, like, why would you want to change something that's not broke,
Well, especially, I told people he now has to figure out how to coach in this new transfer portal era. And that
Mm-hmm.
was only the one criticism last year and the year before was he did a good job of getting guys, building them up as freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that anymore. And I said last year, I said, I think he's going to figure it out. And he did. He got good guys in the transfer,
Yeah.
already attacking the transfer. He's still recruiting freshmen in the Chicagoland area because he's like, you're going to come to Illinois. I think this year proved that like he's going to make those adjustments and how the recruiting works. And
Mm-hmm.
uh I mean, it's shown this year. So I'm like, where's the criticism now? Like,
Yeah.
that's why I'm funny on Twitter. Like, people will post that stuff. Like, wait a minute, didn't you just want him fired like a year ago? Now you're talking about like, oh, they won
Yeah.
a Big Ten title. Now he's good all of a sudden. Like,
Right.
you weren't
Yeah.
saying this under John Gross. Like, we were just hoping to be in the top, be like number 5 in the Big
Yeah.
Ten. Now we're expecting top 3. That's what we're expecting now.
Yeah.
Sometimes the expectation comes with idiots and that say, well, if we don't get there or if this doesn't happen,
Right.
but like,
Yeah. It's we're living through a really special time for Illinois basketball, no doubt. Like it's, to me, for someone who for most of my life they haven't really been a good program. Like I became a fan the year they went to the Final Four in 04, 05 when I was like 13, 14 years old.
right.
And then, they had a couple of tournament runs after that, right? The rest of D Brown and James Augustine's careers. And, the Brandon Paul, Myers Leonard, DJ Richardson era was fun. They had a couple good teams, they had some cool upset wins, but those teams were never considered like, like elite teams that were going to, lead you to, even close to a Final Four, let alone a second weekend in the tournament, right?
Right.
And then there's just that really bad stretch in John Gross's era. And then, obviously, even the first 2 years of Underwood when people were calm for him to be fired then, admittedly, when he first got hired, I didn't know what to think. I just kind of was like, all right, well, it's got to be better than John Gross. Like, we got to let this play out. They got to rebuild the program, all these things. And I just remember when Ayo Dosunmu came to Illinois and like the hype that came behind him and just watching him play that first year, despite how bad the team was, I felt like, okay, well, this kid looks like that's someone that if he sticks around and really perfects his game year in and year out, if you put some guys around him, you could have a good team. And like, that's what he did, watching him and Trent Frazier and DeMonte Williams and, eventually Kofi Coburn and, some of the other guys that came through the program during that era of Illinois basketball a few years ago. Like, it was fun, even though like we were heartbroken by the Loyola loss. Like, it was just fun to be able to be excited to turn on an Illinois game, a couple of times a week in the
Right.
winter during this like terrible like weather that we get here in Illinois, right?
Yeah.
Like, and now they, again, last year, not great in terms of just, I don't know. The team wasn't even fun to watch. And when they lost to Arkansas, I was just glad the season was over, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Right. But the way he turned things around this year with a team that, admittedly, for me coming into the season, I didn't have high expectations. It was more of like, okay, Brad, like, got more transfers in here. Like, you did this last year too. Are you putting are you going to put the right the right transfers around each other? And, I questioned Coleman Hawkins. I questioned if Terrence Shannon was, better than last season or not. And,
Right.
they showed it. They've showed it all year that they got better this past offseason and going into this year. Right. And
Right.
I think a large part of it is the fact that Brad also put the right guys around him. Like Marcus Damask has just been like the perfect complement with Terrence Shannon and Coleman Hawkins. And, Quincy Guerrier, as inconsistent as he is, like when he shows the value that he has, it's almost like Illinoism and it's hard to beat them whenever he's hitting those threes or whatever, right?
Yep.
And Dane Dange's the X factor, and you're seeing Lou Goody hit a couple threes in this tournament so far, and like they have a lot of depth. They can go deep off the bench, and a lot of those guys would be starters on other teams probably. And yeah, I just give them all the credit for putting this team together. And so like, there's definitely more confidence for me for sure. Like I already had confidence that we're at least going to be, a competitive team every year that's going to be competing for Big Ten titles. But I mean, now I feel even more confident about, where this program could be headed over the next 5 years.
Well, and they're
So
having fun when he had the squirt gun at the end of the game. Like that, he comes running in, and
yeah.
then all the hate from the Purdue thing. Like, look at the difference between winners and all that stuff. I was so mad this morning when I saw that. I was like, you've got to be shitting me.
Honestly, it gave me so many Cardinal vibes, like Cardinal fan
Yeah.
vibes.
Yes.
It's something a Cardinals fan would do to be like, oh, this team is having fun. You can't have fun in this tournament. It's all business. Like,
Yeah.
what? And honestly, it's just like some of the most unneeded like discourse on social media that I've ever seen. And it's like, okay, why are Purdue fans continuing to talk about Illinois fans and just Illinois in general? We're not even in the same part of the bracket as you guys. Like, why are you talking about us? Like, you've beat us twice. Like, I've given you my respect. Why are you still talking about us, man? Like,
Yeah.
what is this? So
I don't know. I was gonna tweet at Braggs. I was like, "Is this you making this?"
I didn't get to see him today. He wasn't at the office, but I would if I see him tomorrow, I'm definitely gonna go up to him and be like, "Hey, are you spreading the discourse that I can't have fun, that my team can't go into the locker room and have a water gun fight after a huge win to break a drought that lasted 19 years? Are we not allowed to do that?"
Yeah, and like you said, why are you talking about us? We're not going to play each other unless it's the champion. Like,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah. I admittedly, we're kind of joking around about it, but like, oh man, if Illinois somehow gets in the national title game and they have to play Purdue, I don't know how I will get through that game. I really don't. I think Purdue is really good, man. Like it's hard to beat a team 3 times, but oh man, like that, I wouldn't have much confidence in Illinois winning that game, just to put it frank. And so who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe if it happens, it'd be great theater. That's for sure. But I don't know if I could handle Braggs for an entire year. I don't know if I could handle Braggs for an entire year if that happened.
Because I had him on here once, but it was during the Bears, so we didn't have. I told him out here, I was like, "We're not going to talk about Purdue and Illinois," and he goes, "Fair enough." I'm like, we're not going to do it, and we didn't. We didn't.
Yeah.
But if that happens, yeah, I may have to block him.
Yeah. Me and him. So last year, he got on his high horse about Purdue because they like surpassed any expectations. Like they were really good when no one thought they would be like that good, at least. So he was, he was more insufferable than he's been this year. I'll give him that much. So in some ways, I'm for his own happiness, I'm kind of rooting for them, just for him. And I've got to meet some of the guys he does his Purdue podcast with. Plus, I know like the Purdue radio broadcaster. He listens to CHGO Cubs. I know Matt Painter is a Cubs fan. Like
Uh-huh.
he has a season ticket holder to the Cubs. Like I don't like Purdue, but if they did win and it's not because they beat Illinois, then I could be happy for Braggs, even though like he's said some things in the past, but he's been a lot nicer this year. So I think he's been a lot nicer this year just because he knows that like what happened last year and he just really doesn't have the right to say anything. So I envision him being very insufferable if Purdue does win the national title. But I don't know. If there was one person that I would be happy for, it's him, but no one else.
It's okay. As we were talking, I retweeted that and I said, we live rent free in your head for some reason. And the guy just said 5-game win streak against you guys. I assure you, we don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've already stirred the pot. It's okay.
Related to like just that video or whatever. It's just like, I'm never going to understand the fans that try to stir this kind of like narrative that like certain teams just care more. Like, every team fucking cares, man.
I know.
Every team wants to go out there and win. Every team is highly competitive and wants to win and whatever. It doesn't matter if you're celebrating in the locker room or if you're just sitting in the locker room, talking about the next game. Like it's pretty fair to say that Purdue has higher expectations than Illinois this year, right? Like,
yeah.
Admittedly, like I know going into this year, I didn't expect a Sweet 16. I was expecting, make the tournament and, we'll see what happens going into this year. But after we watched the team for a couple months, my expectations certainly moved to Sweet 16, but it's never really moved to national title game.
No, you have to be realistic. You have to be realistic. And it's right. Like one step. So because of our drought, it's been 19. Like I was like 15 years old the last time when they made the championship. So it's like, I don't want to be like the fans and say it's just going to happen because look at Kentucky. Look who they lost to. Like it just, you never know. Look at Yale. Right. Yale comes in and beats a team, which I coached a kid on Yale. I just want to point that out.
Was it the kid that put up 28? Yeah.
1 year.
I knew he was from Naperville, so that's why I asked. So
it was during COVID. He was here, showed up, really good. He's really good.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, some of the shots he made against Auburn were like, what are you doing at Yale?
Because he's super smart. They had a discus thrower go to Yale too. So I think the school is just a feeder into Yale because they're super smart. Well, that's what we said when he went there. We were like, you could go play at these other schools. And he's like, I want to get my education and go to Yale. And we were like, good for you.
All right.
You're playing at Yale and now look at you.
Yeah. Well, he definitely, got some eyes on him. I don't know what his career is going to turn out to be after this, but yeah, no.
I think his dad was a lawyer, so maybe that's kind of the route he wants to go.
Well, he's going to be a March legend for a really long time because that's a game, at least for Yale fans or whatever. They'll never forget that game. That was
I didn't watch it, but I started seeing it on Twitter and I was like, I kind of forgot he played there because last year he wasn't like doing well. And then I saw him. I was like, wait, I got to turn this game on. And I was like, all right, get it, go.
Yeah. He's definitely a good player. But yeah, we'll see what happens, man. I think they can beat Iowa State. It's just like the only way I can see them beating Iowa State is if they somehow still score 80. If they can score 80, they can beat Iowa State. And Iowa State is like the number one defensive team on KenPom. Illinois is the number one offensive team. So we're talking about number ones for each team. Offense or defense, which one's going to win you the game? Everyone says defense wins championships, but you do have to score. So I just think that Illinois, if they can do what they do, like they do against every team in the country, score 80 to 90 points, and if their defense can keep playing like it has been, which has been better, nothing to harp home about, but like it has been better, then I think they can beat Iowa State. And then we'll roll the dice against probably UConn. But we'll see. I'm just happy to be in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
So
If Illinois gets up and down and plays their fast-paced game, I don't think Iowa State's going to keep up. But if it
yeah.
gets slowed down where Iowa State can play defense, it'll be very tough.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody stopping Terrence Shannon Jr. I just don't see it.
Yeah.
And then,
He's on. I've said this on my show a couple of times now, but like he's very much fueled from the disrespect of not making the first or second All-American team.
how dumb.
And I know that it's largely because of all of the stuff off the court, but he was deserving to at least be on the second team. And the fact that he wasn't, I think, is bullshit personally. So
just forget the off the court stuff. Focus on what he was doing on the court. Like don't.
Right.
And he's fueled by that too. I think every time they chant at him, he's so fueled by it.
Yeah.
So he looks at the crowd and he like waves at him like he's just like, hey, what's
Yeah.
up?
I I've used this comparison to somewhat get me through accepting of this situation. I've also embraced the villain role, which is so weird because I'm not used to doing that. But related to Terrence Shannon, like the water gun fight and the way the guys interact on the court and all these things, it just feels like the team, the coaches, the university believes that he's innocent in this entire thing.
Yep.
And like based off the things that I've read and heard related to the incident that happened in Lawrence, Kansas, to me, it feels like he's innocent.
Yep.
And it's America, so we're all allowed to have our opinions and we're allowed to believe whatever we want to believe. But I'm someone who believes that you're innocent until proven guilty.
Yep.
And, to get into my comparison here is like, I'm a baseball content guy, right? So a lot of Cubs fans have asked me, like, do I want the Cubs to sign Trevor Bauer? And I've openly said that I'm very much against signing Trevor Bauer. Trevor Bauer, he has a long laundry list of bullshit.
Yep.
And the difference between him and Terrence Shannon is Terrence Shannon has this one thing that's all based off hearsay, and that's it. There's nothing else. There's not multiple women accusing him of rape. And also, like, I hate to say this, but in the state of Kansas, they call it rape, but like what's on the documents, I don't think any normal person would classify that as rape.
Right.
I think most people would classify it as sexual assault if it actually happened and whatnot. Right. So I think he's getting a ton of backlash because you read the headlines and it says he's charged with rape. Right. And I'm sorry, I just don't think that that's rape. You know what I mean? And it's a very touchy thing. And I'm trying to, like, it's been hard to talk about on my own show. And I've never had to talk about something so serious like this on my show,
right?
Or on any show I've ever done. CHGO Cubs didn't exist when Addison Russell was going through his domestic violence shit with his ex-wife. Like, I've never had to talk about this kind of stuff in front of a mic before, to potentially be ridiculed by fans who either support of this guy or against this guy. So it's been a very hard topic for me to talk about. But when you consider all these things that we know at this point, I just lean to the fact that I think he's going to be cleared of all this stuff, because at the end of the day, it's all hearsay.
Right.
And
the good point is they wouldn't, if Brad Underwood and Josh Whitman thought he was guilty, they would not probably have granted him. Like, they might have been like, hey, you know what? You're gone. Like, if it's that bad, you're gone.
Right. And I also think it's a big deal, and no one points this out, but the judge who ended up allowing him to come back and play on the team, like, the judge was a female, and she looked at the evidence, and even she believes that there wasn't enough evidence to prove this or that.
Right.
And, so like again, it's one of those things where I'm trying to thread the needle of it
Hmm.
respecting both sides, because at the end of the day, it's a very serious thing. And, I know that there are plenty of stories out there, and people don't want to believe the women that it has happened to and all this stuff. And I feel bad for them. And I think it's messed up that we live in a society where this type of stuff is happening all the time.
Yep.
But I think in this particular situation, I do think that Terrence Shannon is getting fucked over by whatever happened,
Yep.
or didn't happen. And it's hurting. It hurt him in this All-American, voting.
Hmm.
It probably is going to still manage to hurt his draft stock no matter how well he plays, because it's still going to be something that lingers with him in the rest of his career. Um, all these things, right? And so it's just a very tough situation. And I will say this: when I went to the Illinois Northwestern game that was in Evanston this year, and I happened to meet like a friend of his family or whatever, and got to talk to him. And this was like Terrence Shannon's first road game when he
Hmm.
came back from the suspension. And like the guy was a genuinely like really nice guy. And like he was pretty open with me about like what their family was going through and all that stuff right now. And, like he just told me, he's like, he's going to prove everyone wrong about
Right.
this thing, and he's going to be okay. And listen, like I'm trying to look at it from a human side on all aspects. And so it's, I just, I mainly hope that he gets out of it, just so that we know that no one was actually raped or sexually assaulted at the end of the day. I think that's the most important thing. Um, but for Terrence too, for him and his future and stuff, like he's an incredible basketball player. And
Yep.
it seems like a lot of people are in his corner. And to bring this back to Trevor Bauer, I don't feel like there's anyone in Trevor Bauer's corner except
No.
for like Mookie Betts, the one random person like him. And like, I think Mike Clevenger like went to bat for him. And it's like Mike Clevenger has his own laundry list of mess ups too.
Right.
So, like that's how I look at it. It's like, okay, well, Trevor Bauer has this laundry list of bullshit.
Hmm.
Terrence Shannon has this one thing that is all hearsay, and he has many people coming to bat for him saying, Jeff Goodman openly said on Field of 68, like he's one of the nicest kids he's ever met. And you look at the team and how they interact on the court and all these things. And even when they're on the court, but like not in actual game, but like in practice, the video clips that I see that go online and stuff, it just seems like if this was a real thing, the team chemistry would not look like what it looks like,
Right.
And again, I can only read between the lines as much as I possibly can, but I think he's going to be okay once the season is over.
Oh yeah. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
I agree 100% because when Illinois suspended him on their own, they wanted
Mm-hmm.
to look at it. Then when he got the restraining order, for them to say you can come back, they already know because they do their own investigation. Like
Yeah.
NCAA is going to do it, Illinois is going to do it. Brad Underwood seems like the type of guy that's not going to put up with that if it was true. And like you
Sure.
said, the water fight thing, he's right in the middle of it. They would not enjoy that. They
Right.
like they wouldn't have won games this year. Would have been like last year where and it just seemed like a little dysfunctional and
Right.
but that was Brad Underwood's fault. Remember that the locker room thing was Brad Underwood's fault. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
or it was
So,
Coleman Hawkins' fault, which I understand why people thought that. But even this year, it seems so much better than it did last year.
yeah. I'll never understand the Coleman Hawkins hate either. I okay. I'll never understand like I don't know how to explain it. I understand some of the criticism for Coleman Hawkins because it did feel like up until, the last couple months that he hadn't really taken that step as a player
Mhm.
up. Like I felt like at the beginning of the year, I know he was hurt and all these things at the beginning of the year, but I felt like through a lot of the non-conference season, he just wasn't, it
Mhm.
didn't look like he had taken that next step forward as a player.
Right.
But as the season went along, we saw we saw the improvements, and maybe it was because he finally got healthy and he wasn't healthy at the beginning of the year. And so, I give him a ton of credit now, and he's not a guy that's going to go up in the rafters or anything, but he's definitely a guy that when he comes back, like people will celebrate him and, remember the good times that they had with him. I mean, he was part of 3 championship teams. So,
Yeah, I get into it with sleepers media all the time on Twitter because I won't leave them alone because that clipped out. They talk shit about him, and so when they won
yeah,
the Big Ten, I tweeted at them. I was like, "You going to talk about this?" And it was like the next day, they're like, we actually did go to our YouTube channel," and I was like,
yeah,
"After I tweeted this." So
yeah. I've DM'd with Greg a little bit. I DM'd with him after they talked about like the Terrence stuff. And I thought they really explained it pretty well. I think they're good, but yeah, sometimes they can get a little too hot takey for me when it comes to like their conspiracy theories about what's going on within the program and how Brad runs the team and certain guys. Like half the year they're thinking that DGL is going to transfer, and then they're thinking DGL is going to stay. And it's just like, yeah, you guys got to just stick with one side for an entire year or something like that, though. Like, I don't know. Like, that's just kind of how I feel. They go from one side of the spectrum to the other pretty quickly, it feels like. And
yeah, they do a good job, but
yeah,
it's that stuff.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
They can, like what Greg said about Coleman Hawkins, and like it was all after like the Maryland game and how like he
oh,
wore that
yep,
shirt,
yep.
and like it's like, oh, you beat a bad Maryland team and whatever. Like, what have you done? But like it was honestly pretty unneeded. Like you did, like why you said any of that, like I don't know why you said that. Like you're asking for like people to react to something like that.
Oh, yeah,
So
and I did.
yeah,
Trust
you
me,
did. You
I did
did. I just remember listening to it myself and was like, are you trying to get us to react? Like,
because
um,
it can happen.
yeah, yeah. And, in fairness, I will say after that happened, um, Coleman had like one of his worst games of the year against
Mm,
Penn State. Oh,
yeah.
for sure had like his worst game of the season against Penn State at Penn State. So, it did feel like karma kind of came back to haunt him a little bit for one game.
Mm,
But you know, Big Ten tournament champions were in the Sweet 16.
yeah.
I think he's living up to like everything that he says. I think he's great for college basketball. I think he's been funny on social media and all those types of things. And a lot of fan bases don't like it, specifically Purdue fans, as for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think I've said this on my show. I think Coleman is the kind of guy that we would all hate if he wasn't on our team.
Oh, for sure.
And like I've always wanted one of those. I feel like we haven't had one of those in a long time. So that's why I
Yeah.
kind of embrace him.
Oh, I do too. We finally have a bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah. But people like I'm trying to think of a team that like he's never lost to. Like he probably never lost to Wisconsin um
They never lost to Michigan.
or Michigan, right? Like I'm sure those fan bases are going to be happy to never see him again. So
Oh, eh, I was so happy when he came back. People were like, even Illinois fans are like, they were happy, but then they're like, and I was like, no, you want him back. Oh, he
yeah.
talks too much. He complains. I'm like, that's part of the criticism, but guess what? He'll talk shit to anybody on that court, and we need somebody like that.
Yeah. I'm never really going to understand the fans that like get upset about guys who complain at the refs and stuff. It's like every guy complains to the refs.
Every single one.
Every single one of them. Maybe more. Maybe there are some that do it more than others, and that's why they stick out. But like they're in the in the moment in the game when, especially when a crucial foul call is made. Like I would do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would do the same thing. So, if you want to criticize a player because he took a bad shot or he's just not playing well, fine. But when it comes to you don't want a guy back just because he complains to the refs more than like, this other guy, I just think that's like a lazy reason to not want a guy
Mm-hmm.
back.
Oh, so lazy. So lazy.
Right.
And I'm in an argument with this guy on Twitter about Purdue. It's really fun.
Nice.
Just so you know, I'm multitasking
All right.
because I said, well, at least Illinois fans don't talk about you. And somebody did. And they put up a clip of Purdue saying this is boring. And I replied with, well, it was boring. That one play was boring. So he just gave me the stats of the fucking game. I'm like, I got him now. When he
Yeah.
start giving me the stats and like talking about this, I'm like, I got them now. Got him.
Nice.
Idiot. Well, Cody, I appreciate you. Been on here for a long time, but I appreciate you coming
Yeah.
on here.
What is it? Almost freaking 10 o'clock? You held me up for 2 hours.
Well, I didn't know it was 2 hours. I looked
Yeah,
and I
well,
was
we
like,
were just
oh,
having so much fun. So,
it's true. I really didn't know. I was like, oh, we've been on here for like an hour. And I looked, I was like, oh, fuck.
yeah. No, it's all good, man. I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate your support for CHGO and all those things. So uh good luck with everything with the show, and hope you get some good coaches on this summer and fall and moving forward and stuff. So
Well, I appreciate it.